So the very fact that these emails come into the public sphere from Rudy Giuliani, the fact that Andrei Derkach seems to know more about these emails than almost anybody else, tells you where they're coming from. I mean, at some point, you sort of have to believe what you see, which is that when individuals who are either identified Russian agents or are conspiring with Russian agents are providing the information upon which mainstream media are reporting, you have to understand what the deal is here. And again, I'm not alone here. 50 high-level intelligence agents, people who have worked in the intelligence agencies, came out and said that this is most likely Russian propaganda.
That means nothing. That means nothing. It's obvious why they would take that position. There's a benefit for them, right? They politically are invested in Joe Biden beating Donald Trump. And some of them, I'm telling you, want to get back into the game at the top of the intel community and be important and powerful again. And one way to do that is by signing letters like this. Who do you think the Biden transition team is going to want to have running their CIA or their become their DNI if they manage to get to that point by beating Donald Trump? People that will sign a letter like this when it counts. Everyone knows this. Everyone can see it. But where is there evidence that this is disinformation? It doesn't exist. But the evidence for Russia collusion also did not exist. It was a fabrication. It was a falsehood from top to bottom. There was no collusion. And yet now we're at a point where they're telling us the exact opposite of what is true is true. This is the ultimate gaslighting, and that's what this has turned into. If Joe Biden was a solid candidate, if Joe Biden was inspiring and people really believe that he'd do a great job, why would people need to resort to this kind of stuff? Why would the attacks on Trump have to involve lies? Because now, remember, if it's Russian disinformation, now Trump is the liar, you see. So it actually goes from defense to offense. Not only is this thing not true, Trump is part of a conspiracy against Hunter and Joe Biden with it. That's why this is so useful. You can never disprove it. How can you disprove it's Russian disinformation? Well, prove it isn't. That's the way they approach it, at least. I mean, a normal, rational person wouldn't say that, but that's what they're doing. And beyond that, it's not just, Hunter didn't do anything wrong. This is the problem that we have now. Because of Donald Trump, you see. So they turn defense to offense. The shield becomes the sword. And that's all a part of this as well. In the last couple of weeks here, friends, this is it. This is game time. You know it's game time. So, I don't know. It's kind of an intense show today. And I'm feeling like we're in the fight. And I'm not going to lie to you. I think Trump's going to win, but it's going to be close. It's going to be ugly. And it's not going to be over on November 3rd in my mind. Maybe it will. I love it when I make predictions, and I hope they're wrong, and they are wrong. But not always. That tends not to be really the only thing I can think of in recent memory. Well, ACB hearings didn't get as crazy as I thought they would. The efforts to stop that, and Trump's election in 2016. But other than that, on the big ones, I tend to get it right. But I'm trying to avoid getting into the Jeffrey Toobin story. I don't think this is just. Is prurient the right word? Or, this is salacious. I don't, Toobin's a jerk. And so people see a guy like this who's a hack and who's nasty to people and has a really, really bad history of behavior that makes him an odious fellow. And he does something that is this level of embarrassing. I mean, I can't even really describe it on radio. I mean, special fun time. Is that how I described it?
You described something else like that. I felt it applied here.
Okay. Fun time. Yeah. So Jeffrey Toobin was having some fun time on a Zoom call, which, as you know, includes video, with some esteemed colleagues of The New Yorker, which is probably the snootiest left-wing publication or, liberal publication out there. It's the snootiest, right? The most, I subscribe to The New Yorker. Oh, listen to me. I'm so fancy. I believe in The New Yorker. I mean, some of the cartoons are clever, but other than that. And yeah, it's not from a big story. Initially it came out and they said that there was. So I guess we are good. We need a break from the sky is falling and Trump and all this stuff. So initially the story came out and it said that he exposed himself accidentally on a Zoom call. And now to this, because a lot of us are working from home. I work from home. Other people. I thought, all right, look, everything's got a camera on it these days. We're all super connected all the time. If he left a laptop open, thought he closed out a window, and was on the other side of his apartment. I think he lives in New York where, space is small. Even if you're rich, you don't have very big space. And if you're not rich like me, you have very small space. But, you could see, okay, look, this can happen. It's embarrassing. But then they suspended him. I thought, ooh, whoa. I mean, come on. It's an accident, right? I mean, this is like, come on. And I thought, no, this is more than that. It wasn't he was changing on the other side of the bedroom or something and left the Zoom call open and someone got a quick flash of saying, I'd say, look, come on, we're all adult. I mean, it wasn't intentional. He says, sorry, you let that go. This is a little worse because he was on a Zoom call and apparently on another Zoom call at the same time. And the other Zoom call was clearly more interesting because he decided to engage in fun time on the video. So this is going to be that's a tough one to live down. Although I'm sure CNN is going to he'll be back. He'll be fine. He's already a very wealthy guy. So he'll be all right. Right. And that's the thing. But I guess I don't even know what well, there are a few lessons learned from this one. But I think one of them is, you never want to be that guy who people think is so nasty and so vicious, such a jerk in the media or in any business, that when something like this happens to you, there's very few people that are willing to show any sympathy. Very few people that are willing to say, now, and I'm talking about the initial allegation, which is different from what it turned out to be. So maybe that's a lesson from it. And the other one is all mics are on and all video cameras are recording, and you just, you don't know. You don't know. But that story, I think everyone also focused in on that because they just wanted something that wasn't the sky is falling in Russia and all this really intense election stuff. I think there was just a psychological need for a story that was something else at the top of the news ticker for a few hours. So that one broke yesterday. And now producer Mark has reminded me that we can always use the euphemism fun time because we can say that on radio, right, Mark? There's no FCC issue there, so there we go.
Yeah, that's the perfect way to describe it on radio.
I think that's right, And, just for everybody out there, if you're going to have fun time, make sure you've closed your high-level work call Zoom. That's important. Important safety tip for all involved. And I will say there's a level of embarrassment that even when somebody is a pretty awful person, there's a level of embarrassment where you see it and you read it, you just go, oh man. And I think this reaches that one. So I guess we'll just take the lessons learned and now we can go back to the Russian disinformation. Recently, I got a crash course in home title theft. You better pray this crime never happens to you because it can ruin you financially. It goes after your most valuable asset, your home. Here's what happens. The legal title to all of our homes are online. That's right. They're up there in the cloud. A cyber thief hacks into these, finds your home's title, and uses a quitclaim deed, kicks you off, puts themselves on the home, and then all of a sudden they can take out loans, steal your equity. You often won't find out about this until the payment notices arrive or perhaps even an eviction notice. You have to create a virtual barrier around your home's title with Home Title Lock. Go to HomeTitleLock.com and use the promo code RADIO to get yourself 30 free days of protection. You can also check once you go to HomeTitleLock.com, put in your address to see if you're a victim of this crime already and don't even know it. Again, that's HomeTitleLock.com. Use the promo code RADIO. That will get you 30 free days of protection. Create a virtual barrier around your home's title today.
we just stand for the principle the American people have a right to know what's going on here. The Director of National Intelligence today, I know, made it clear that there is no evidence to suggest that the information on that computer reported in the New York Post is a result of any disinformation campaign. And the American people have a right to know about the business dealings of the Biden family. I mean, Lou, we just spent the last 3.5 years where the Democrat nominee in 2016 had worked with a foreign entity to try and dig up dirt on President Trump. And I don't remember the media shutting off access to that information.
And yet they've shut off this information as much as they can, although it doesn't seem like it's going to work to prevent people from being able to at least access it. Whether they believe it or not, that's another part of this, too. There's the suppression that comes from preventing distribution, and then there's also the suppression that comes from forcing people to, or bringing people to doubt the veracity of something. And so it's one thing if the email never gets into your inbox, let's say, so to speak. You can block information that way. It's another thing if you've already been trained to believe the email after it comes in is fake. It's not true. What it's saying is, so that's another part of what the media's been doing here. What Pence says is obviously true. Pence's claim here, the American people have a right to know. I don't think anybody could make a serious case to dispute that. And so since that's true, since that's the situation, what is the holdup then with the media? They're just throwing up these smoke screens. And for a media apparatus that has been completely fascinated with getting Donald Trump's tax returns, as if that was going to be some smoking gun and bring down his presidency, that was a huge story. It was a huge story before they even had the tax returns. They just would make stuff up about what they thought might be in them and then report on what their guesses were. Then you have this, where all of a sudden this huge scoop, this big story, is not touched by the mainstream media outlets at first, and then all they try to do is kill the story after the fact. I mean, the New York Times printed something earlier this week saying that there was a staffer on the New York Post who works for the New York Post who was uncomfortable with going forward with the story. Okay, there are a lot of close calls that get made in newsrooms sometimes. Who cares? What's the New York Times doing? Well, we all know what they're doing, carrying water for the Democrats. I mean, to the point where at least I think they're getting a good workout. They're probably building up those lats and traps and carrying all that water for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris is making the media physically stronger, in theory. And then you also have what the VP is hinting at here, and the DOJ came down with it today. The antitrust actions that are coming up. We've got this one against Google. But first, here's the vice president on the role of big tech in all this. Play 14.
And let me be real clear. President Donald Trump and I are not going to let big tech block the truth. We're not going to let big tech censor what Americans read or see or say in this election or ever.
That's great if it's true. I hope they can make it true. And then we also have this from the DOJ today. DOJ saying that they're bringing a full-on antitrust lawsuit against Google. Now, this is going to get antitrust and monopolies, and this is an area where people know the terms, but it gets down deep in the weeds very quickly. But this is the biggest challenge from the government against a tech company to come up in many, many years. I mean, you'd have to go back to probably Microsoft in the late 90s and the early 2000s for anything to be similar to this. I mean, it's been a long time since you've had something like this. And it's massive. I mean, Google is effectively a $1 trillion company. And it takes in about $160 billion of revenue every year. The way Google makes most of its money is through advertising. But there's also this other way that and this is what comes up in the suit that the DOJ has filed. And Bill Barr said that they were gonna take big tech to task on this stuff. They were not going to allow this to just continue. But what you see here is the area of vulnerability that they're going after so far is big tech thinking, or in this case, Google thinking that it's allowed to make all this money off of advertising, but then cut these deals with all the smartphone makers that the default internet browser is the default internet browser for all your smartphones is going to be Google. So you open your phone, Google's already installed. That's what you're using. You do a search on your phone, it's using Google. There is Bing, and there's Yahoo, and there's there used to be Ask Jeeves. I think that one went away. Am I forgetting? Is there another one that anyone really uses these days, Producer Mark? I don't know. I don't think so. I'm pretty sure there's not really, and it's certainly no near competitors. I mean, Google has 80 to 90% of the overall search engine market, which means that its ability to determine what companies are successful and what ideas are promoted and presented. And Google is a fantastically powerful company. And now they're going to be held to the same standard as other companies when it comes to anti-competitive practices. I think the stock actually jumped up a little bit on news of this, which is interesting because the breakup value might enhance. I don't know. I don't really even understand how that works, to be honest with you. But I mean, I have the basics of it, but I don't know why people would necessarily assume that. And now we're going to get into a real fight between a company that has effectively endless resources and the federal government, which also has effectively endless resources. Because you know where the federal government gets its checkbook from? You. And it'll keep writing those checks. Got no problem with that at all. So, look, I think this is the right move. I think that we do have to regulate big tech. And I wish that I could say that this was, let the market speak, but it's not a free market. It's not. There are a lot of government regulations that are already in place that affect companies, that affect the way that you'd be able to compete with some of these monopolies. And remember, monopolies are really only possible if you go back and look at sort of the Austrian school and the Milton Friedman take on this. Monopolies are only possible with government collusion. So this is a problem that government has had a hand in, and now the government is going to try to do something to fix it. And I agree, when government tries to fix things, it often makes it worse. But if we keep losing to big tech, meaning politically, now they're trying to separate this. They're trying to say that, this has nothing to do with suppression of conservatives. Well, it doesn't. It's a different issue, but it has shown people, I think there's a greater willingness now to take on the antitrust aspects of a case like this against Google, because we realize that these companies are pushing ideas and they are friends to those certain people in power. And that's something that has to be looked at more closely. They've gotten this free pass. Remember, Google's old mantra was don't be evil. Quite a strange thing. I know Google's now part of Alphabet. That's the primary holding, the holding company that Google's a part of. But don't be evil is not something that you would think a neutral internet platform that just wants to be helpful and give people great free products and a means of communication. It wouldn't have to tell people that. But there's some other things that are going on behind the scenes here. It's a very left-wing company, very left-wing institution. And now it's going to have to answer for some of what it's doing, because wouldn't it be nice if there were search engines that we're really competitive with and weren't so dominant in the marketplace? Because then when Google is doing, the main site is a BLM, is basically a BLM poster, or is all about, I don't know, some other political issue, you'd say, okay, look, I don't really like this. I don't like what this company stands for. I'm going to go with, Yahoo's version of this or something like that. So we shall see how this plays out, but don't hold your breath, because it's going to take a long time and Google's going to fight like mad, and they've got the resources to do it. As promised, our friend Sean Parnell joins us now. He is a former Army Ranger, decorated combat veteran, author, best-selling author, and currently running in an absolutely critical race in Pennsylvania for House District 17. Sean Parnell joins us now. Sean, my man, great to have you.
Hey, great to be here, Buck. How's it going?
Oh, man, it's crazy for me, but I feel like it's probably even crazier for you right now. 2 weeks out from the big day. I want to get into what you're seeing nationally and also specifically in your congressional race out in Western Pennsylvania. But first, we have this Supreme Court decision, 4-4 it came down, so tie, which means that it reverts to the lower court decision in Pennsylvania, which said that, well, actually, Sean, let's have, you're in that state, so this is really going to matter, folks like you. What just happened here? What did the Supreme Court decide to do?
Well, they allowed for a ballot extension, Buck. The Supreme Court effectively moved the election day from November 3rd to November 6th. And so what's really disconcerting about this is that ballots can be returned up to 3 days after Election Day and don't require a postmark. Now, look, this is not me trying to throw partisan jabs, right? But I think anybody that's approaching this in a fair-minded way sort of scratches their head and says, what is going on here? How does this make sense? Pennsylvanians deserve free and fair elections, and I think people are worried that the Democrats are going to see, how many votes they're down on Election Day, and then they're going to go into overdrive over the next 3 days to try to deliver those votes. And look, we've known all along, Buck, that Republicans are going to show up on Election Day around here. And again, I'm not trying to be hyperbolic, but I have never seen an enthusiasm for a president like I have here in Pennsylvania. And truthfully, we don't focus enough on this, but the proof is in the numbers of our voter registrations, Buck. And we are absolutely destroying the Democrats in voter registration. And I say this all the time, but Pennsylvania is actually more favorable for the president today than it was in 2016. The only difference is sort of the chaos that's surrounding the mail-in ballots.
Now, that's really interesting to hear because we keep seeing the big headline is Trump is down in every national poll, in every battleground state. This is what the drumbeat is from the media, and I think it's meant, at least in part, to demoralize, and they're very happy about it. The same way that they were talking about Amy Coney Barrett polls showing that a majority of the American people didn't want her confirmed, and that was a big talking point. Well, then the hearings happened, and now firm majority of the American people wants her confirmed, and now polls don't matter all of a sudden about that, right? So we know that the evidence, the basis for all this changes so very, very quickly. What are you seeing right now in Pennsylvania that is favorable for the president? I mean, you're telling me that that voter registration is up. Do we have any sense of how the early voting is going?
Well, Democrats are beating us in early voting, and it's not even close. But look, bottom line is this: the people that are voting right now on the Democratic side of the aisle, and this is just my campaign talking, right? But they're by and large people that were going to show up on Election Day, and it looks to us like they're cannibalizing their own Election Day vote. We talk about the numbers in the state of Pennsylvania, Buck, and these are hard numbers. The Republicans have registered almost over 200,000 new Republican voters since 2016. That's some of those people are undoubtedly Democrats that maybe voted for Trump in 2016 that maybe switched party registration, but nowhere near all of them. And so in Pennsylvania, President Trump won the state of Pennsylvania by 44,000 votes thereabouts in 2016. And we've got 180 plus thousand newly registered Republicans here in the state of Pennsylvania, by the way, who aren't reflected in the polls, who are definitely turning out and voting for President Trump. Now, in my district, Republicans are also beating Democrats in voter registration. I think we've registered 1,000 more Republicans than the Democrats have registered for themselves. And so, look, those are the numbers that I look at, and I look at the numbers here in Pennsylvania 17 as well. And if the district had existed in 2016, President Trump would have won this district by over 10,000 votes. And Senator Toomey, in the very same year, won the district by 17,000 votes. Now, you will never hear that portrayed on the media, right? You will never hear those hard numbers portrayed on the media because they'd rather focus on polling whose methodology, quite frankly, is dated. And here's why, Buck. Look, we've got Governor Tom Ridge, who's a guy that I respect immensely, who's a lifetime Republican here from Western Pennsylvania, was a congressman in Western Pennsylvania, a governor, is voting for Joe Biden. But almost every Democrat that I talk to in Beaver County, all of which is in my district, are voting for Trump. How do you poll that? How do you find statistical sampling that would represent that? It's very, very difficult to poll Western Pennsylvania. And I will tell you this race, both Pennsylvania and PA 17, is going to be a razor-thin margin. It just is.
Speaking of Sean Parnell, he is a former Army Ranger, and he is now running against Connor Lamb out in Western Pennsylvania, Congressional District 17. Sean, you and I talk offline a lot, too. We've known each other for years. What is your response to this obviously concerted and really ruthless campaign to pretend that once again Donald Trump may win, according to the Democrats, because of Russian interference, this time a Russian disinformation campaign around Hunter Biden's emails?
Buck, look, I've never seen the media like this. And it's not just the national media. I've never seen the media so in the tank for a political party before in my life. And look, man, I think it's dangerous. The people rely on the media to get the truth and the facts out about both parties. Look, I want the media to ask me tough questions, but the media should also ask Democrats tough questions as well. Like, for example, Connor Lamb is not on the record about court packing. Connor Lamb is not on the record about removing the filibuster. Connor Lamb is not on the record about issues that would fundamentally transform our country. And this is not Sean Parnell saying this stuff. These are Democrats, national Democrats in Washington, who say they're going to do this stuff if they win. Now, if we had a responsible media at the local and national level, they'd be asking the Democrats these questions and getting them on the record. And the fact that look, this Hunter Biden story, this is a huge deal. The fact that the Biden family, what it looks like, they profited off their name to the tune of tens of millions of dollars funneled through Hunter Biden and into the Biden family from countries like Russia, Ukraine, and China. And that to me is just unbelievable to me that the Democrats and the media are peddling this Russia disinformation nonsense to where even the DNI has come out and said, no, that's not true. But what's worse is that nobody has even really asked Joe Biden in any sort of concerted way about it. To the CBS reporter who did it, I can't remember his name. Hey, kudos to him for actually asking the question. But the American people need and deserve an answer on these questions before Election Day. And it's just staggering to me that he can get away with it. He can seemingly get away with it.
Now, Sean, your race is being looked at as one of those bellwether congressional races for the rest of the country, particularly because you're a veteran running against a veteran in a swing state, as a contentious an election as anybody's ever seen, and a swing state that now is going to have the 3-day extension, as you mentioned, to get ballots in. Don't even have to necessarily be postmarked. What should people know about your opponent, Connor Lamb, and how you stack up against him, and people be hearing this that are in and around your district?
Well, I would say that, when people in Pennsylvania 17, they think, Ilhan Omar and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez are both radical, right? But sometimes they don't think that Connor Lamb is, even though his voting record is exactly the same. And what I say is that if you look at Ilhan Omar and you look at Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, they're outward with their radicalism. Connor Lamb is almost more dangerous because he keeps it under wraps and nobody here locally holds him accountable for his radical voting record. Connor Lamb is a case study in contrast of somebody that comes around every 2 years and tells people what he thinks that they want to hear in district and then goes to Washington and does something completely different. And by the way, said he was going to be pro-gun, has an F rating with the NRA today. Said he's going to be pro-life, votes against the Born Alive Act twice. Said he was going to support President Trump and the Republicans who put him in office, voted to impeach the president. Said he was going to oppose Pelosi, votes with Pelosi over 90% of the time. Takes FOP endorsements in 2018 And 2 years later, he's marching with defund the police radicals. I mean, he is just a case study in contrasts, Buck. And
It sounds like Joe Biden a little bit. It sounds like the whole Joe Biden presidency is premised along a guy that, he's not, you can trust him. He's not so bad. He's not so radical. Joe even says that. And then you say, well, hold on a second. You were saying you wanted to ban fracking like 5 minutes ago. That's pretty radical.
Yeah. Well, not only Joe Biden, but Kamala Harris said she bans fracking day one. And the Unity Task Force, which is Joe Biden's environmental and energy task force, the chair of that task force is Bernie Sanders. The co-chair of that task force is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. And Connor Lamb is on that task force as well and works for them. Now, all of these people have been on the record saying that they're going to ban fracking, all of them. And so are you going to believe what they say 2 weeks before an election when they desperately need the votes of people in Pennsylvania? Are you going to believe what they've said all along, up to and including the primary? I would say look at what they said in the primary, look at how they flip-flop, but also look at their voting record, right? Like every single one of those people. I mean, Kamala Harris co-sponsored the Green New Deal in the Senate. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez introduced the Ban Fracking Act in the House. Connor Lamb voted to block our withdrawal from the Paris Climate Accord and voted to pave the way for a future Democratic president to ban fracking on private and federal land. Look at what these people do. Don't necessarily listen to what they say when they're desperately asking for your vote in an election season.
Sean Parnell, everybody. He's running in Pennsylvania 17th. Hopefully going to be the next congressman from that district. We're pulling for him. Sean, my friend, always great to talk to you. You've run a heck of a race so far, man, and we know you're going to finish strong. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Buck.
They want to take away your guns, your oil, and your God. Okay, that's what they want. They want to take away your Second Amendment. They want to take away fracking and oil. They don't care. They want to take it away. They want to go to the Green New Deal. That's not for Texas. Texas is not going to be losing their guns, and they're not going to be losing their oil, and they're not going to be losing their religion or their God.
President's telling people the truth about the fracking, the oil. I mean, you can't have a Democrat Party here that thinks that, as we talked about at the beginning of the show today, climate change is an existential threat, CO2 emissions are an existential threat, and then say that they're not going to be hostile to fossil fuel usage and emissions and all the rest of it. And guns, too, I believe. And this is not some of my predictions I'm very confident in. This one's a little more speculative. But I think at some point they're going to use their newfound health authority, health emergency authority. Under a Biden administration, they will expand that to the health emergency around the gun violence epidemic. I take the Democrats at their word when it comes to what they say they want to do when they can get away with saying it. Not in a general election a few weeks before people are going to cast votes, but when they're just thinking out loud or telling their base what they're going to try to accomplish, I think they should be taken seriously on that one. And this is also true on the issue of taxes, because it's so strange. They keep saying that they're not going to raise taxes, but then it comes out, no, they are going to raise taxes. But they're only going to raise taxes, they say, on some people. Well, is that going to include small business owners, let's say, who can be taxed at the maximum individual rate? Is that, where really does this change in tax policy leave us all? Here's Kamala claiming that Trump, of course, is a liar. We'll talk about this. Play 8.
And by the way, in those debates, as per usual, you can rely on Donald Trump to engage in distortions and basically lie to the American people. So let's be clear about this. Joe Biden will not increase taxes on anyone who makes less than $400,000 a year. Period.
Right. Keep in mind that state and local taxes are almost certain to go up in all these Democrat places. And now everyone says, oh, well, Buck moved to Texas or moved to these other states, and that's good. And my brother just did. My brother's down in Austin, Texas right now. I'm going to go visit him hopefully in about 3 or 4 weeks after the election. But they can get you at the federal level, too. And that's part of the game here. That's part of the plan. They want to go after you on the federal side for more money. So remember that. And they also are going to find all kinds of ways to increase taxes without saying they're really increasing taxes. They don't really believe that Economics 101 is what it is. They think that they can always find a way around it. New York and New Jersey, by the way, I know that only some of you live in one of those two states, but California as well is super high tax and going to be higher tax soon. New York and New Jersey for top earners, which you live in New York City making over $400,000 a year, doesn't make you rich by any. It makes you upper middle class. I know that sounds crazy, but it's true in New York if you look at the projections because of how expensive daily living and real estate is here. 58% would be the top rate according to the Wall Street Journal here. You'd have a 58% all in state, local, federal. If you make $400,000. That's not that far off from Sweden, my friends. That starts to really get up there. But you're going to see more of this because Democrats are going to have to enlarge government. They do have a year of massive spending and dwindling or dropping, I should say, revenue that they're going to use for all of this. So just get ready for it. And you're not going to be told the truth. Oh, one other thing I wanted to note here. Pelosi, speaking of the spending, I don't think Pelosi is there's not going to be a deal today. When you hear this, that could change, but unlikely as I go on air right now. Not going to be any deal. And that just tells you a lot about these Democrats. People really are suffering. The Republicans wanted to get money out there. Nancy Pelosi's offer to struggling small businesses and workers across America right now who need help. They've got bills they can't pay, who are in a really tough spot. Nancy Pelosi's explanation for them is that she'd rather they have no money than have money, but Nancy not get her political wish list from the Congress and signed by the president. That's really what it all comes down to. So Nancy's willing to watch workers suffer, which I don't think is surprising to anybody, but here we have very clear, very, very blatant evidence of that. So the party that claims that they care so much about working people is, in fact, making sure that working people will have a harder time paying their bills. No deal. It's been weeks and weeks of negotiating. Pelosi's going to end up, it seems, again, it could change, seems like no deal because today's the deadline, and Pelosi doesn't want Americans to feel better, not until after the election.